This is the Wheel of Time Spoilers podcast. Your hosts are Seth Jacobson and Patrick Heiler.
Hi, I'm Seth.
And I'm Patrick. Chapter 35 of The Shadow Rising. Sharp Lessons. And our symbol is the Aiel spear and shield. The heart of the stone in Tel'aran'rhiod was as Egwene remembered it in the real world. Huge polished red stone columns rising to a distant ceiling, and, beneath the great central dome, Kalendor, driven into the pale floor stones. Only people were missing. The golden lamps were not lit, yet there was a sort of light, somehow dim and sharp at the same time, that seemed to come from everywhere at once, or nowhere. It was often like that, indoors in Tel'aran'rhiod. What she did not expect was the woman standing beyond the glittering crystal sword and peering off into the pallid shadows among the columns. The way she was dressed startled Egwene, bare feet and wide trousers of brocaded yellow silk, above a darker yellow sash. She was quite bare, except for golden chains hanging around her neck. Tiny gold rings decorated her ears in sparkling rows, and most startling of all, another pierced her nose, with a thin, medallion-lined chain running from nose ring to one of the rings in her left ear. "Elayne?" Egwene gasped, gathering her shawl around her as though she were the one with no blouse. She had garbed herself as a wise one, this time, for no particular reason. The daughter heir leapt, and when she came down facing Egwene, she was wearing a demure gown of pale green, with a high embroidered neck and long sleeves that dangled to points over her hands. No earrings, no nose ring. "It is how the sea-folk women dress at sea," she said hurriedly, with a furious blush. "I wanted to see how it felt, and this seemed the best place. I couldn't do it on the ship, after all." "How does it feel?" Egwene asked curiously. "Cold, actually." Elayne looked around at the surrounding columns, and it makes you feel people are staring at you, even when there's no one's there.
I think there are people there.
There like always is in this room.
Yeah. I think Brigida's watching them, honestly, if nobody else. There may be Forsaken as well.
Yeah.
And for anyone who says that this movie doesn't have just as much, or this show can't have just as much nudity as, like, Game of Thrones, there are so many opportunities to see our characters naked.
There's so much nudity.
They want to do. There's so much nudity. It's all over the place.
Poor Tom and Julian. They do not know where to look most of the time. Half the crew are women.
Poor Tom and Julian. I'm sure they're just crying themselves to sleep every night.
Studying the columns herself, Egwene shrugged uncomfortably. It did feel as if they were being watched. No doubt it was just because they were the only people in the stone. No one who had access to Tel'aran'rhiod could expect to find anyone to watch here. Tom Marilyn? And Julian Sandar? Are they with you? Oh, Egwene. Rand sent them. Rand and Lan. Well, Moraine sent Tom, actually, but Rand sent Master Sandar to help us. Nynaeve is quite set up about it. About Lan, though, of course, she won't let on. Egwene smothered a small smile.
If you imagine yourself with pierced ears, isn't that a wound?
I feel like it's more like a scar.
Sure, but like, I'm just curious, like, that's sort of an odd, like...
If you pierce your ears in Tel'aran'rhiod, do you wake up with ear holes?
With pierced ears, yeah. Because I feel like if someone took a piece of metal and shoved it through your ear, it would cause the wound of a pierced ear.
Min says maybe they were clip-ons.
Clip-ons, maybe. Anyway, the plot hole, I'm pointing it out. Anyway, that was a good point. That is actually a really interesting, like, it's a thorny little problem now that I think about it. Like, I can't quite figure out how that works. You can change your body briefly with belief, but then it snaps back to reality, which is probably why you can't heal yourself. Is like, you could probably make yourself better for a brief period of time, but as soon as you stop concentrating, the wound would come back. And so that's what she's doing, is she's just... altering her reality
for
briefly.
A short time.
Yeah, and then it goes back to actual reality when she stops thinking about it. Okay, yeah, I can buy that. I know that was a little diversion on earrings, but it was fun. We're seeing some of the Tel'aran'rhiod stuff that we can debate about now in terms of how the effects work.
Were you paying attention, Neo, or were you looking at the woman in the red dress? Look again.
With no top.
Freeze the program.
There is no hole.
There is no spoon.
You're telling me I can dodge balefire? No. I'm telling you, when you're ready, You won't have to die. You won't have to. It's just a weave.
Load the jump program.
That's actually surprisingly accurate, because when Perrin truly is ready, he doesn't need to dodge balefire. He just splits it in half.
What are you telling me? I could dodge bullets? And then, of course, Elayne asks after Rand. How is he doing? And Egwene's like, fine, I think. She doesn't really know. And she made it a full report. I'll skim really quickly through here. Portal stones, Ruidian, Ancestor's Eyes, the strange creature from the Dragon Banner marking Rand's forearms, bears revelation about the Aiel's doom, Alcar Dell, and the dream stuff. It's like a pretty good summary of that paragraph. But that's Egwene explaining everything that's happened to her since going to, well, while traveling to the Waste and after.
Go listen to the last episode if you want to be caught up on that.
Yes.
We just got done talking about it.
And then, of course, in turn, Elayne catches Egwene up on what's been going on their end. One of which, that's probably the only notable thing that's popping into my head, is Elayne is training with the Wind Finder on, is it Joran or Coen?
Yes.
I forget.
Joran.
In weaving the winds or manipulating the weather.
Using those really thick flows that, which basically, it's another leveling up for Elayne here, is that this is one of those points where she really learns to handle much more power, raw power, than she's been able to handle before.
Right.
So it's a huge moment for her in terms of just learning to channel. And I like the way there's symmetry of the two of them being like, hey, I found this population of channelers. At the same time, the other one's like, well, I found that population of channelers. Turns out both the Aiel and the Sea Folk have a large population of very good channelers that we just didn't, quote unquote, know about.
Right. And also that little bit is important because, right, Egwene is learning about dreaming and Elayne is learning about manipulating the weather, but also Elayne is now helping Joran power the craft across the sea, so they're moving even faster than they would normally. So really, really fast. They are skimming along the water.
And this is a sort of a lead into the whole Bowl of the Winds plot line for me. The Windfinders and the Bowl of the Winds are inexorably linked as the solution to the weather. And so, I see that as a pretty significant plot line through and through. I know some people get annoyed with the Windfinders and the Kin and that whole, group, but if you really think of them as sort of the Bowl of the Winds folks, it helps me understand why they're in the story and what their need is.
Right.
And we learn that, there is no such thing as a Wilder among the Aiel because they capture. No one learns on their own.
Nobody escapes.
The wise women know. And we hear about the men going to the Blight and fighting the Dark One and not surviving long enough to channel. Mm-hmm. And we know that's not true because most of them are captured and turned to the Dark.
Well, at least many. Elayne explains all that. In the midst of that, Egwene says that, Avienda was a channeler and she did the test and whatever. And Elaine's like, that's why I felt the same feeling when I met Avienda and when I met Joran. There are two untrained channelers. Or, one's untrained, so the other one isn't. Two women with a spark, I should say.
Mm-hmm.
So she and Nynaeve are ahead of schedule. Egwene is learning quickly. Elayne tells Egwene about the Koramor and what that means to the Sea Folk. So the chief of chiefs among the Sea Folk.
Yeah, there's just so many parallels here where you've got the Karakarn, you've got the Koramor, you've got the Aiel, you've got the Sea Folk. The people who live on the water, the people who live without water. Again, it's very much this balance between you've got the continent in the middle and then these two people on either side occupying the dry and the wet sides of the land.
You know what this reminds me of? Isn't it when I think Avienda sees the ocean for the first time? And she just marvels at it and she's like, all that water and not a drop to drink. How strange.
And then when she gets she doesn't get seasick, but she gets terrified when there's no land in sight. She has to keep her constantly looking at the boat, and she glances out over the edge. It's nope, not looking over there. Gonna keep looking back at the mast.
You see, Rand al'Thor, wood floats. So we tied several of these trees together, and we made a boat.
Honestly, like that. Yeah, that's crazy. It's crazy.
I wouldn't even do that. I'm a good swimmer.
You imagine crossing the Mississippi like that?
No.
Fuck no.
You might just get sucked in. You don't know.
Yeah.
Don't
It's like
do that.
dangerous.
Way braver than I would ever be.
Give me a pool.
Yeah, right.
The Aiel don't really even know how to swim. They just know that like wood floats, and so they just hang on to wood and like hope and kind of let the river carry them downstream until they get and like push their way across.
Right. Oh, I think it's actually that's Bane and Chiad telling Perrin how they came to be so far into the wetlands.
Or I think it was actually telling.
What was it? It was
the three girls. Remember the Dance with Me Shadow Man?
Oh gosh, was it that far back?
Yeah, because they were asking like, Avienda, can I ask you a question? I think it may have been what Avienda said.
I thought it was Avienda talking. I can't remember exactly, but yeah, the level of bravery I'm like fairly well equipped to do that, and they don't even they just kind of roughly understand the concept that wood will float in theory. They're just like, well, there's only one way to do this.
And they're like, it turns out these, and he slaps a tree, float just as well. There's a lot of recapping in this chapter.
Yes, there is. Oh, I enjoyed reading that scene. Nynaeve's like, stabbing women. Unacceptable. Like Chiad looks at Bane and she's like, yeah, she sounds like a wise one.
Yeah.
Just nod sagely at each other.
I'm already getting nostalgic for early podcast days, and we're not even that far into the series.
Yeah, there's a lot of recap of what happened over the last handful of chapters. Elayne explaining everything that happened to her, Egwene explaining everything that happened to her. This is like a big recap. Rhuarc thinks that some of the Aiel might refuse to follow Rand, and
the Shido.
Right, and Elayne saying like, oh, the sea folk seem completely unified in what's happening over here, and Egwene says, oh, that sounds nice, and Elayne constantly flickering and like in and out, and or like her clothes changing and things, and saying like, you've got to teach me this dreaming stuff because I feel ridiculous. Egwene's like, yeah, it's whenever I have time, and of course she never does.
Well, and part of the reason why she's having these tenuous promises about when she's going to come back is the wise ones, as we saw, forbid her from going into Tel'aran'rhiod without them. And here she is, like, going into Tel'aran'rhiod without them. And it's really bratty. And we'll see that here in the next second. But, you know, this is the Egwene that I think a lot of people have a problem with. The one who makes a promise and then breaks it. And I think that's one of those sort of childish things that she grows out of, and that is part of why she needs the Aiel to learn that, like, some things you just have to follow up on. You have to keep your word.
Right.
Hence, Sharp Lessons Learned, the title of the chapter.
Egwene went to go meet Elayne. I mean, they agreed to this meeting already. But Egwene went to go meet her because she believes that the Wise Ones should be too busy to be tracking what she's doing. She knows that they're going into the dreams of all other Wise Ones and clan chiefs and warning everyone, you know, that the world is ending. So they're busy. So this is probably a good time. Of course, in a moment, she gets caught, and I'll read that fun part.
Amis is sitting next to her bed, kind of.
The only other thing that I had before that read there is Elayne looking at Kalendor sunk into the ground in the heart of the stone and saying, why did he do that, do you think? And Egwene's like, oh, it was to hold the Terrans to him because he knew that if they go and look at this thing, that they would know that he'd certainly be coming back for this powerful artifact, so you better behave and all that.
And we speculated a lot about all the various reasons, you know, he wants to seal it away because he doesn't want to use it because it was too traumatic to have that much power and it's a temptation. Like, there's a lot of reasons for him to bury it there besides just that. But
yeah,
we talked about that back at the end of book 3.
But of course, Elayne thinks that it has to do with her mean letter to Rand.
Yeah, her second letter, which may have touched off a nerve.
I heard that you were talking to that Berlane hussy or whatever it was about.
I like this. I would have been a fool to write things to make him angry. Her hair sprang up in all directions like a crazed crown. She was not aware of it. It's like, so basically, it's a Pinocchio. She lies. I wouldn't have made him angry, Just basically, yes, you did. You totally wrote something in that letter that would have pissed him off. You were telling him off and basically being like, you better do what I say. I'm not going to be some lapdog. Like,
Egwene's like, angry about what? And Elayne's like, oh, nothing.
Yeah, nothing. I didn't say anything crazy in those letters. They weren't totally contradictory or anything like that. Nope, not at all.
I'll start the read here.
Why can't men be simple?
Something snatched Egwene. The heart of the stone dwindled into blackness, as if she were being hauled away by the scruff of her neck. With a gasp, Egwene startled awake, heart pounding, staring up the low roof of the night-darkened tent over her head. Only a little moonlight crept in at the open sides. She lay under her blankets. The waste was as cold at night as it was hot during the day, and the brazier that exuded the sweetish smell of dried dung burning gave little warmth. Beneath her blankets, right where she had lain down to sleep. But what had pulled her back? Abruptly, she became aware of Amis, sitting cross-legged beside her, cloaked in shadows. The Wise One's murk-shrouded face seemed as dark and foreboding as the night. "Did you do that, Amis?" she said angrily. "You have no right to just haul me about. I am Aes Sedai of the Green Aja." That lie came easily to her lips now. "And you have no right—" Amis cut her off with a grim voice. "Beyond the Dragon Wall, in the White Tower, you are Aes Sedai. Here, you are an ignorant pupil, a fool child, crawling through a den of vipers." "I know I said not to go into Tel'aran'rhiod without you," Egwene said, trying to sound reasonable. But something seized her ankles, hauled her feet into the air. Blankets tumbled away. Her shift dropped to bunch in her armpits. Upside down, she hung with her face level with that of Amis. Furious, she opened herself to Saidar and found herself blocked. "You wanted to go off alone?" Amis hissed softly. "You were warned, but you had to go." Her eyes seemed to glow in the dark, brighter and brighter. "Never care for what might be waiting. There are things in dreams to shatter the bravest heart." Around eyes like blue coals, her face melted, stretched. Scales sprouted where skin had been. Her jaws thrust out, lined with sharp teeth. "Things to eat the bravest heart," she growled. Screaming, Egwene battered vainly at the shield holding her from the true source. She tried to beat at that horrible face, at the thing that could not be Amis, but something gripped her wrists, stretched her taut and quivering in midair. All she could do was shriek as those jaws closed around her face. Screaming, Egwene sat up, clutching at her blankets.
How many times have we seen that in the TV show where you get them waking up and you think it's normal and then something crazy happens and then they wake up again and you're like, oh my god, it was a dream the whole time.
Yeah.
So totally, Amis pulled her into a separate part of Tel'aran'rhiod and, freaked her out just to be like, there are dangerous things in the night. I'm a monster. And made herself look like a monster.
Including me.
Including me? Yeah, I could have totally killed you if I was an evil thing right now.
I am darkness. I am the night. I am Amis.
Trying to teach her a lesson of basically like, you don't know what you are doing.
Yeah.
You are in danger.
Screaming, Egwene sat up, clutching at her blankets. With an effort, she managed to snap her mouth shut, but she could do nothing about the shudders that racked her. She was in the tent. Or was she? There was Amis, cross-legged, in the shadows, glowing with Saidar. Or was it she? Desperately, she opened herself to the source, and nearly howled when she found the barrier again. So yeah, Amis just incepted her. She's like, by the way, I can do this infinite times, but I don't have the freaking time for you right now. So just know. You want to do this 100 more times?
And she's just sitting there actually shielding her physically.
I love that she wakes up and looks over and Amis is there, threatening in the shadows. And then she wakes up and Amis is sitting there. It's the same thing that happens twice.
So I do want to talk a little bit about the lie.
Sure.
Simply from the fact that this is a clear and present lie. And by claiming to be Aes Sedai, it really preps the Wise Ones to believe that Aes Sedai can lie, which may be helpful later on, especially when facing like the Black Aja. But it's just an interesting thing that like, if anyone else who claimed to be Aes Sedai lied like this, we would immediately jump to Black Aja. And it's interesting that Amis doesn't go there.
I don't think that the Wise Ones know enough about Aes Sedai to realize that. Because Amis just kind of says, oh, I didn't think Aes Sedai could lie, but she doesn't know that. I like, or she doesn't know all the mechanics of why they can't lie.
Sure. She doesn't understand the oaths and the oath rod and that sort of thing.
But I like what the point you're making here, that this kind of Egwene's misbehavior while masquerading as an Aes Sedai in front of the Wise Ones kind of sets the Wise Ones up to not be so submissive to the Aes Sedai later.
Well, and it's hard to really be submissive to Aes Sedai when you've had one as your apprentice and who was kind of a spoiled brat, at least occasionally, who eventually proves herself. Yeah.
Spanked them and terrified them and then made them dress up like a little girl. It takes all the power, the illusion of power away,
Right. It's just like, oh, well, they're just women like anybody else, and women are kind of stupid,
Yeah.
So, I mean, it primes them for that.
Amis continues to yell at and berate Egwene. I'm like skipping over a bunch of this, but there's like a lot of acidic dialogue here. She's furious.
Yeah. Well, she broke her promise.
Yeah.
That's like, I know you don't understand Ji-To, but Jesus Christ, like, seriously? I can't believe you broke your promise to me.
Yeah. She says, if I am to teach you, I must know you will do as I will say. I will not watch a pupil of mine cut her own throat. You foolish, foolish little girl. She also says, and this is kind of notable, that, okay, I can't shield you anymore. You're much stronger than I am. And Egwene's not even at her full potential. So she releases the shield and says, like,
She's very strong. I want to address, like, Page Discord's really digging into me about my statement about the Wise Ones not respecting the Aes Sedai because of Egwene. And what I'm saying is not that they see the Aes Sedai, they disrespect the Aes Sedai because they see Egwene as terrible, but just that they see Egwene as human. And that takes away some of the mysticism around Aes Sedai. They realize that they actually are people, and Egwene is maybe one of the best of them.
That's true. I think respect is probably the wrong word to use here. It takes away the fear, the like magic of Aes Sedai.
The mysticism around Aes Sedai, yeah.
So where now later they're on equal footing, whereas at first when the Wise Ones even see an Aes Sedai, they're afraid. They think they're being taken to task for the ancient sin, right?
I think without Egwene, we'd see the Wise Ones acting a little bit more like the kin and a little less like the Wise Ones.
Right. We know just as many tricks as you do. Don't try to pull the wool over our eyes. We're on equal ground now, I will keep my word, Amis, and she means to never go into Tel'aran'rhiod without an escort from now on. I promise I will, but I have to meet with my friends in Tel'aran'rhiod. I promise them too. Amis, they might need my help, my advice. Amis's face was not easy to make out in the darkness, but Egwene did not see any softening. Please, Amis, you have taught me so much already. I think I could find them wherever they are now. Please don't stop when there is so much yet for me to learn. Whatever you want me to do, I will. Braid her hair, Amis said in a flat tone. My hair? Egwene said uncertainly. It would certainly be no inconvenience, but why? She wore it loose now, falling below her shoulders, yet it was not so long ago that she had been almost burst with pride on the day the women's circle back home had said she was old enough to put her hair in a braid, like the one Nynaeve still wore. In the Two Rivers, a braid said you were old enough to be considered a woman. One over each ear. Amis's voice was still like a flat rock. If you have no ribbon to twine in the braids, I will give you some. That is how little girls wear their hair among us, girls too young to be held to their word. When you prove to me that you can keep yours, you can stop wearing it so. But if you lie to me again, I will make you cut your skirts off short, like little girls' dresses, and find you a doll to carry. When you decide to behave as a woman, you will be treated as a woman. Agree to it, or I will teach you no more. I will agree if you will accompany when I must meet. Agree, Aes Sedai. I do not bargain with children, or those who cannot keep their word. You will do as I say, accept what I choose to give, and no more, or else go off and get yourself killed on your own. I will not aid it.
I love that. I love that smackdown. It's so good.
Yeah. I will spank you, little girl. I will put you in your room and you'll never come out again.
It leads to one of my favorite interactions later when Rand is sort of observing Egwene at the distance, and he's like, and she gets her hair out of braids finally, and they consider her grown up, and he's like, huh, someone must have finally told her that that's how little girls dress. I wonder if she was doing that by accident. And it's like, no, you just don't understand. You have it totally backwards. But that's one of those little details that's just fun to pick up on a reread or it's just something if you're paying attention. You realize what the costume actually means. But then you see her get out of it from Rand's perspective. So like I love the way we see Egwene's progress through Rand's eyes and the way we see Rand's progress through Egwene's eyes.
Yeah.
Like it's such a great way to reflect, because neither one of them understands what the other one's going through. And so like if you take their statements at face value, you just don't have no idea what's going on. You have to look at what they observe and then read into that to be like, oh, actually Egwene is now respected by the wise ones.
Yeah.
And Rand's going insane.
I mean to be hard on you, Egwene, but not without purpose. That you think I have taught you much already only shows how little you knew to begin. You have a strong talent for the dream. Very likely you will outstrip any of us by far one day. But if you do not learn what I can teach you, what we four can all teach you, you will never develop that talent fully. It is most likely you will not live long enough to do so.
I wanted to read this because I think it gets to the core of what drives Egwene. She, more than anything else, wants knowledge. And I think that, to me, is just her driving force. And it's really well encapsulated in this quote. She wanted to learn. Sometimes it seemed an unending thirst. However much she absorbed, she could not quench it. That still did not make it fair. So that's just a short little quote saying, and it was just slightly before what you read, saying like, hey, I have a need, like an addiction to learning more, and that's all I want to do is learn more from everybody. And she pursues knowledge at the expense of almost anything else.
And then over the next page and a half or so, Amys kind of collects Egwene and says, there's a meeting that's about to happen, so I'm, glad that's probably why Amys came to get her in the first place. And come on. And Egwene's like, yeah, sure, let me get dressed. And Amys is like, no, just go.
That makes a lot of sense, that they were too busy to check up on her. She just came to get her for the meeting.
Right.
And found her asleep and was like, that girl's in Tel'aran'rhiod when we told her not to. I'm going to teach her a lesson.
And then turns into a Tyrannosaurus Rex with her mouth around Egwene's head, which is the way I like to imagine that anyway.
Did you want to talk about just like the sweat tent and what it is and how it works?
Oh, sure.
This is the first time we're seeing a sweat tent.
Yeah, I think a kind of typical Aiel tent for a gathering, but they have it like essentially staked right to the ground rather than having like air gaps that there would usually be. And then so they heat rocks, either take them from a fire or I imagine because wise ones are in there, they can just heat the rocks. And some poor girl stands next to the blazing hot stones and throws water at them, and it makes steam, right? So it's a wet sauna.
Yeah. And basically we do that automatically now with like electric furnaces and just water delivery systems. And we do them in rooms. If you've ever been like, most YMCAs and stuff have a wet sauna. A lot of gyms do. Yeah.
So not only is it heated, but it makes you sweat a lot so that you can then scrape. So the sweat comes out of your pores and it pushes all the dirt out. And if you scrape that off, you actually come out relatively clean without having wasted enough water to make a bath.
Right.
They're just you only need a few cups to bathe a lot of people, basically.
That's actually kind of gross now that I think about it.
I can relate. I remember thinking about this when I was like backpacking through like the Mojave and Anza Borrega desert. It's you have to go so far and work so hard to get water that you wouldn't dare waste it on trying to wash yourself. It's just
right.
such a waste. You just let the dirt cover you and surrender. Whereas with this, you could at least scrape the dirt off.
Unless you have like an open supply of water or something like that.
Yeah, it doesn't really exist out there.
Yeah.
There's places where you could collect it, but you wouldn't bathe in it. I mean, it's not enough. It's a trickle coming out of a spring. They all gather into the tent. Moraine is there. Avienda is there. Egwene. Bear, Amis. There might be another wise one there. I can't remember. Oh, I'll read
Elayne?
this. Elayne is probably there, yeah. We must discuss what to do about Rand al'Thor, Bear said, when Amis was seated too. Do about him, Egwene said, alarmed. He has the signs. He is the one you have been looking for. He is the one, Elayne said grimly, brushing long strands of red gold hair from her damp face. We must try to see that as many of our people as possible survive his coming. Just as importantly, Ciana? Why can't I get this right? We must assure that he survives to fulfill the rest of the prophecy. Elayne glared at her, and Sienna added in a patient tone, else none of us will survive. Rhuarc said he would set some of the Jindo for bodyguards, Egwene said slowly. Has he changed his mind? Amis shook her head. He has not. Rand al'Thor sleeps in the Jindo tents, with 100 men awake to see he wakes as well. But men often see things differently than we. Rhuarc will follow him, perhaps oppose him in decisions he thinks are wrong, but he will not try to guide him. Do you think he needs guiding? Moiraine arched an eyebrow at that, but Egwene ignored it. He has done what he had to do, without guidance so far. Rand al'Thor does not know our ways, Amis replied. There are 100 mistakes he could make to turn a chief or a clan against him, to make them see a wetlander instead of he who comes with the dawn. My husband is a good man and a fine chief, but he is no peace talker, trained to guide angry men to ground their spears. We must have someone close to Rand al'Thor who can whisper in his ear when he seems ready to step wrongly. She motioned Aviendha to throw more water on the hot rocks. The younger woman complied with a sullen grace. And we must watch him, Elayne put in sharply. We must have some idea of what he means to do before he does it. The fulfillment of prophecy of Rhuidean has begun. It cannot be halted short of its end, one way or another. But I mean to see as many of our people survive as is possible. How that can be managed depends on what Rand al'Thor intends. Bear leaned toward Egwene. She seemed to be all bone and sinew. You have known him from childhood. Will he confide in you? I doubt it, Egwene told her. He does not trust as he used to. She avoided looking at Moiraine. Would she tell us if he did confide? Elayne demanded. I raise no anger here, but Egwene and Moiraine are Aes Sedai. What they seek may not be what we seek. We served Aes Sedai once, Bear said simply. We failed them then. Perhaps we are meant to serve again. Elayne flushed with obvious embarrassment. Moiraine gave no sign that she saw, or that she had heard the woman's earlier words, for that matter, except for that tightness around her eyes. She looked as calm as ice. I will help as I can, she said coolly, but I have little influence with Rand. For the present, he weaves the pattern to his own design. Then we must watch him closely and hope, Bear sighed. Aviendha, you will meet Rand al'Thor when he wakes each day, and do not leave him until he goes to his blankets at night. You will stay as close to him as the hair on his head. Your training must come as we can manage, I fear. It will be a burden on you, doing both things, but it cannot be avoided. If you talk to him, and especially listen, you should have no trouble remaining near him. Few men will send away a pretty young woman who listens to them. Perhaps he will let something slip.
That's kind of true.
That's totally true.
And it seems to work.
A pretty girl who cares about what I say? Okay.
Yeah.
I think I like this.
It's not a terrible thing. It's a wonder Rand doesn't find a reason to get rid of her. She just went through the rings. She saw a bunch of her futures, and she's really fucking angry about Rand right now. And she has no desire to be around him because she knows if she is, she's going to fall for him. And she's already promised Elayne that she would protect him and take care of him and watch him for her. And so that puts her in this bind where she's like, I don't want to spend time around him.
Right.
Because it's going to put me in this crosshairs of Jito.
And in this scene, it's pretty subtle, but when they order Aviendha to do this, at first she says she won't, and then they say, oh, yes, she will.
Yeah, you will.
And then she's almost crying when she's yelling, I hate him, I don't like him. Like, she's not begging either to not do this. She's refusing, which is crazy. You don't tell wise ones no, especially when you're their personal apprentice.
And they're like, we're not telling you to sleep with him or love him. You just listen to
what
him.
He says. Yeah.
Yeah. And she's like, no, because I'm going to have to love him. The rings showed her the future, and it's really not a future she wants. at this point.
Egwene leaned over to put a hand on Avienda's shoulder. You've told me we are near sisters, and I think we are. Will you do it for me? Think of it as looking after him for Elayne. Avienda's face spasmed. I will do it, she said, slumping. I will watch him for Elayne. For Elayne. Amish shook herself. Foolishness. You will watch him because we told you to, girl. If you think you have another reason, you will find you are painfully mistaken. More water. The steam is fading. Avienda hurled another handful onto the rocks as though hurling a spear. Egwene was glad to see her spirit returning, but she thought she would caution her when they were alone. Spirit was all very well, but there were some women, these 4 wise ones, for example, and Swan Sanche, with whom it was common sense to keep a check on your spirit. You could shout at the women's circle all day, and you still ended up doing what they wanted anyway, wishing you had kept your mouth shut. Now that that is settled, Bear said, let us enjoy the steam in silence while we can. There is much for some of us yet to do tonight, and for nights to come, if we are to bring a gathering to Alcair Dale for Rand al'Thor. Men always find ways to make work for women, Amish said. Why should Rand al'Thor be different? Quiet settled over the tent, except for the hiss when Avienda tossed more water on the hot rocks. The wise ones sat with hands on knees, breathing deeply. It was really quite pleasant, even relaxing, the damp heat, the slick, cleansing feel of sweat on the skin. Egwene thought it was worth missing a little sleep. Moraine did not look relaxed, though. She stared at the steaming kettle as if seeing something else, far off. Was it bad? Egwene said softly so as not to disturb the wise ones. Ruidian, I mean. Avienda looked up quickly, but said nothing. The memories fade, Moraine said just as quietly. She did not look away from her distant vision, and her voice was almost chill enough to take away the heat in the air. Most are already gone. Some I knew already. Others? The wheel weaves as the wheel wills, and we are only the thread of the pattern. I have given my life to finding the Dragon Reborn, finding Rand, and seeing him ready to face the last battle. I will see that done, whatever it requires. Nothing and no one can be more important than that. Shivering despite her sweat, Egwene closed her eyes. The Aes Sedai did not want comforting. She was a lump of ice, not a woman. Egwene settled herself to trying to recapture that pleasant feeling. She suspected such would be few and far between in the days to come.
So that little bit at the end, well, there's one thing I want to talk about before that, which is men will always find a way to make women work. And we hear the exact same thing for men, which is all the time like women
always making shit more complicated.
Always men, yeah. We're all making work for each other. No one's, it's balance on both sides. But we also, as Avienda's having her reaction to what she saw in the rings, Moraine is also having a reaction to what she saw when Moraine went through the rings, because she saw the whole thing with Lanfear and her death, and the fact that there's a lot going through her head.
Terrible sacrifice she has to make.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
To save the world.
And that's sort of what she's steeling herself there at the end, which is to say, I've given my life to finding the Dragon Reborn. Nothing and no one can be more important than that. And basically saying she's going to sacrifice herself for him.
That's what I was thinking too. She's thinking about herself. Nothing and no one is more important than that. And she's thinking, because now she knows that this is going to happen and what she's going to have to do.
She also may be shaken because in one of those lives, she definitely slept with Rand.
And and all we know about that is, and that didn't go well.
That did not go well.
I think that's a direct quote from her. Yeah.
But yeah, she's basically realizing she's going to spend a year being tortured.
Mm-hmm. Right, and she had to live through whatever potential realities she just saw. So, we don't know what they are. We know what a few of them are.
Mm-hmm.
Right, so there's a good chance that for quite a while she's already been captured by the Finn and tortured.
Yeah, I mean, that's why they say, blessedly, the memories fade, because you wouldn't want to remember lifetimes of being tortured.
Right, and who knows whatever else happened, If I always think, whenever that comes up in our conversations, that if Moraine started sleeping with Rand, then Lanfear would get involved.
Oh, yeah.
Who knows what she would do?
Yeah.
Awful stuff.
Right. Even probably worse than the Finn.
So Moraine just got tortured for 7 days. It's no matter what the outcome, something terrible happens to her.
And or 700 lifetimes.
Right, yeah. Go to spoilercon.org?
Yes.
Go to spoilercon.org. Check it out. There is now a Wheel of Time West Coast Con.
Thank you for listening to the Wheel of Time Spoilers podcast. Rate us in the Apple Podcast app or support us on Patreon. Is that good enough?